Hey guys, I hope everyone is having a good Sunday today. It is February 21st. How the heck did we already make it to almost March? I feel like I blinked and yesterday was Christmas. I don't get it. Time is flying so fast. But it's Sunday, so it is story time, and we're going to read two more chapters from A Taste of Your Own Magic, book 2 in the Agents of A.S.E.T series. So let's jump on in. We left off last week at chapter 16. And remember, for any of you who have missed previous readings, they are all on my YouTube channel, including the entire reading of book 1. So let's do this. Chapter 16. Food worked better than magic on Sage's mental state, and by the time Gray had stopped in the parking lot of the Sortilege Staffing Solutions building, she'd all but forgotten the argument they'd had. You weren't kidding. There's a magical human resources? Sage marveled at how well magical society blended with the human world. A single sign above the door was the only indication of the business they were entering. 3 simple words in flat black, outlined in white: Sortilege Staffing Solutions. Set inconspicuously between 2 call centers in the middle of a large business development center, it didn't seem very magical at first glance. But Sage knew better, imagining the wonders that lay beyond what normal eyes could see. You work for the supernatural police force, and you're surprised by this? Gray responded with extra snark. Where else would someone of magical nature think to get a job? You know, it's okay just to answer with a simple yes every now and again. Those of us who are a little starstruck are allowed a teensy bit of awe every now and again. Damn newbie, he sighed. You sound like a crotchety old man, she threw back at him. His attitude was exactly the reason she needed to terminate their partnership. Get off my lawn. His mouth twitched, not quite committing to a full grin, but revealing amusement all the same. Maybe there was hope for him yet. Was that a joke? Did Gray Maddox try and be funny? Sage exaggerated the shock in her tone. Stop the presses. This one's going on the front page. And this is why I can't be anything but a crotchety old man around you. The smile died just as quickly as it had started. You take everything too far. Which is exactly what a crotchety old man would say. For all she knew, he might actually be an old man. No one really explained the whole immortal aging thing again. Just tone down the asshole a bit, and we're all good, okay? I'll try to remember that, but you know how us old geezers are with memory. He fixed the fedora on top of his head and gave himself a quick look in the rearview mirror of his bike. See, you're learning already. Sage fought the urge to knock the stupid hat off his head and settled for a playful punch aimed at his arm. Gray dodged the blow. Are we done playing now? And the Funslayer returns, she sighed. We have work to do? Sir, yes, sir, she saluted. Fall in, he replied. Your mission? Keep that giant trap of yours shut. You say that every time. It's kind of becoming your catchphrase. Fine. Gray's nostrils flared with an annoyed huff. Try not to act all, what did you call it? Starstruck? This is a place of business. Magical business? The prospect of delving deeper into new aspects of the magical world trumped any animosity she had towards her partner. Always is. You remember Sylvia, right? How could she forget the Shadow Runner? A shadowy woman as beautiful as she was deadly, who could kill with a touch. Yeah. Is she our suspect or victim? She's our contact. Oh. That took the wind from her sails. They hadn't really gotten off on the right foot the last time they'd met. Thank goodness for magical immunity. Sylvia couldn't hurt her, a Terra, but power like that demanded a certain level of respect. Gotcha. Be cool, follow my lead, and I know, keep my damn mouth shut. Sage finished his sentence for him. Gray led the way inside. She expected Hogwarts or some form of Ministry of Magic when walking into the Sortilege Staffing Solutions building. Maybe not owls flying around delivering memos. That could get messy. Instead, she was greeted by a drab linoleum-tiled waiting room. A perfectly normal-looking woman sat behind the wall of glass, busy with paperwork. She didn't even look up when they entered. A sign with the label receptionist had been fixed to the glass, multiple times by the way the adhesive outlines framed it. The dilapidated state of the place killed what remained of Sage's excitement. Chairs that had seen better days, worn clear through to the foam padding, lined the walls, and a locked door prevented them from moving further into the building. Not that she wanted to explore further. Her hopes of being amazed by magical people in their own environment all but died, much like the cockroach she spotted on its back twitching in the corner of the room. You sure we're in the right place? Gray paid no attention to her. He walked up to the glass panel and slid a piece of paper under the lip. We're here to see Sylvia. The receptionist on the other side continued to stare at her work. Do you have an appointment? She smacked her gum as she spoke, her fingers still busy typing at her keyboard. Gray tapped the glass and held up his wrist to the window. Yes. The receptionist's eyes lifted briefly, widening behind cat-eye glasses as she spotted the mark. Her hands moved to a button next to her keyboard. Sorry, sir, she said and pressed the button, and a loud buzz signaled the locked door had been released. This way. Gray led Sage into the back offices. It continued to amaze her how much the mark that she had hated all her life had become a literal door opener. Sage followed quickly behind her partner. The office opened up into a sea of open-air cubicles. Creatures of all kinds buzzed around like worker bees, flitting to and from workstations, pollinating them with papers while retrieving stacks to bring back to their own desks. Flashes of light arced from one station to the other. A folder materialized as the light faded away. This is more like it. Sage stopped to take it all in. Keep up, newbie. Gray caught her gawking and pulled her by the hand towards the back office. They were more traditional looking there, with walls rather than dividers. Sage spotted the wispy form of Sylvia floating back and forth as if pacing. The angry look on her face said this meeting was not going to be any easier than their last had been. You take your sweet time when it's not one of your own at risk, don't you? Sylvia greeted them with a sincere look of disdain. Sage bit back her snarky reply, remembering how volatile Sylvia had been in the past. Apologies, Gray replied stiffly. He took a seat in front of the desk and pulled out a notebook. Can you give me some details on the missing person? You mean to tell me your boss didn't give you any information before sending you two down to my office? The incompetence of your agency is astounding. Sylvia's form faded in and out as her voice rose in volume. I've already told what I know. To whatever lackey it was, I spoke with them on the phone. The last time Sage had encountered the Shadowrunner, she'd expressed no amount of love for A.S.S.E.T. But here, she was needing that very group she'd spent so much time bad-mouthing. Karma was funny like that. Sage tried to keep her face neutral. Laughing would most certainly invite more anger. Gray gritted his teeth. The best way for you to help us find your missing co-worker... Assistant, Sylvia corrected. Yeah, fine. We need you to confirm the details and let us have a look around. Gray's continued civility was impressive. I wouldn't have noticed she'd gone except Thalia makes the most divine cup of coffee. Sylvia floated towards a filing cabinet at the back corner of her office. Nearly lost her to a cafe last year, but I convinced her she'd have a better career here with us. Well, that wasn't very nice, Sage blurted out. Barista? Sylvia glared back at Sage as if sizing her up. How many successful coffee waitresses do you see out there? What if she wanted to open up her own cafe? Sage replied weakly. Even Gray was glaring at her now. Open mouth, insert foot, as usual. Then she would need to have business connections, the kind I can help provide for her, Sylvia sneered. Or would have, if she hadn't poofed into thin air. She retrieved the file from the cabinet and floated back across the room, slamming the manila folder in front of Gray. That is your area of expertise, though, isn't it? Am I being accused of something here? Sylvia's form shifted from cloud to woman violently. I'm simply looking at facts, Gray responded. Please, feel free to fill in the blanks for us. Sage's jaw. There we go. First major flub. They're gonna happen. Sage's jaw nearly dropped from shock. After an accusation like that, she expected Sylvia to fly off the handle, but rather than assault them with a verbal tirade or worse, Sylvia returned to her human form and let the haughty mask slip. Thalia didn't show up for work yesterday. Her car is still parked outside. No one has seen or heard from her, and I'm worried. So the last place she was seen was here? Gray noted and continued his interrogation. Is there any security footage we can look at? We've reviewed the videos. She's not there. Sylvia wrung her hands as her answers continued to offer nothing helpful. I'm sure you'll understand that we need to look at the security footage ourselves to see if there's anything you might have missed, he added. You blame me, don't you? Is this how you operate? Insult your clients? Sylvia looked as if she was one spark away from blowing a fuse, and Sage didn't want to be anywhere near that explosion. I don't need to remind you that the Terras can see through magic, Gray continued, unfazed. If that's what took Thalia, we might catch something your eyes cannot. Shadowrunners see through magic too. Sylvia faded into nothing and came back as if punctuating her statement. Be that as it may, we still need to see standard protocol. Take it up with the boss if you need to. Sylvia materialized back into her human form and pressed a button on her phone, shouting, Get me copies of security footage for the last 48 hours. Thank you for your cooperation, Gray said calmly. Now, can you tell me what her class and talent was? Kitsune, Sylvia said after slight hesitation. It's all in her file. She shoved the manila folder towards him. More words Sage didn't know. She'd have to look that one up later too, but clearly the designation was of some importance. No wonder you wanted to keep her around. Gray's comment earned him an icy glare from Sylvia. That must have hit closer to home than Sage's earlier remark about the coffee shop. Gray nodded to himself as he made a note. How long had she worked for you? She came to us a couple years ago, Sylvia replied. She was young, only one tail, but sharper than the flunkies here combined. And I had hoped to groom her for success. And what did she do for you here, besides make coffee? Gray asked. She was my eyes and ears for the newly hired. She kept tabs on those in their probation periods with new employers and acted as liaison for my department. So she knew who was where and what they were working on, Gray clarified. Why does it sound like you're interrogating me? Sylvia threw her hands on her hips in a dangerous glare, rather than helping me to find where she went. Just being thorough, he replied. Did she have any possessions, trinkets that she never went without? Her essence, you mean? Sylvia asked. Yes, he replied. I don't have it, if that's what you're implying. Why are you so jumpy? Sage asked. Don't you take that tone with me. Sylvia turned her icy stare on Sage. You know very well how this works. I'm a shade, always first to blame. No one's blaming. I'm just gathering information to make our case. Gray's tone never wavered from the baseline. She never let her keys leave her sight, so I assume her energy was disguised as one of her charms. There's at least 50 charms on there. She jingled like Father Christmas when she walked down the hallway. But no, I don't know for sure. Why? Have other kitsunes disappeared? Sylvia asked a little more calmly this time. We have to cover all the angles. If her power was taken, she would go with it. Just ticking the boxes on my list, Gray explained. Feel free to go through her desk and look at her car if you need to. Sylvia stopped floating and took her seat behind the desk. And when you find her, make sure she comes back here. Hard to find a good assistant these days? Sage asked snarkily. Contrary to popular opinion, I do have feelings, Sylvia replied with equal measure. I took her under my wing, and I wanted to see her succeed. And yes, I am worried about her. She's like you, with a little less attitude, full of potential. Youth are often corrupted before they can see what's happening. If she had one tail, she'd have at least been about. I can read. If she had one tail, she'd have to have at least been around a century. Gray added. As a damn fox, first tail, first transformation to her human form. Sylvia responded defensively. Why am I tripping up so much now? Clearly, Sage had a lot more research to do, so she was a newbie to being human. she asked, knowing the moment the words left her lips, she'd earn more newbie ridicule for herself. Regular Captain Obvious, aren't you there? Sylvia beat Gray to the punch on that insult. Sage chose to keep her mouth shut rather than stick her foot in it again. We'll have a look around and see what we can find. Gray stood and pulled Sage's arm. We'll be in touch if we need more from you. Chapter 17. Searching around Thalia's desk hadn't produced anything other than paper cuts. Sylvia had said they'd only been recently unaccounted for, but based on the tipsy tower of papers in her inbox, the fox had to have been AWOL for a lot longer. Either that or she was a serious slacker. Gray had acted oddly closed off the entire time they'd been there. Sage watched him pick through the papers, and more than once he stuffed some of them into the file on Thalia that Sylvia had given him. He might have been onto something, but in keeping with his usual secretive behavior, he made no effort to clue her into his plan. As far as she was concerned, they left Sortilege Staffing Solutions as empty-handed as they'd arrived. No real leads, no new suspects, and no connections, only vague, second-hand conversations about yet another magical being she didn't know. You're going to give me the details on this Kissoon now, right? Sage asked as they walked out to the parking lot. You have the same access to the computer system and libraries that I do. Gray shielded his eyes against the glaring afternoon sun. Do some research of your own. He looked around the parking lot. That's helpful. That's really helpful. Thanks. Better than being lazy. His attention shifted from the parking lot to the roof of the building, clearly searching for something, but as usual, not telling her what it was. You obviously know a bit about them, so it might be beneficial to the case if you'd share, so I'm not wasting time researching old information. It's all old information, Gray replied mechanically. He wandered through the parking lot, zigging and zagging through cars. Occasionally, he'd stop to peer into one, but never for more than a moment. Sage followed like a lost little puppy, grumbling the entire time. So very partnery of you. Sylvia seemed angry about her missing assistant, Gray commented as he squeezed between two cars parked close together. I don't think she cares about Thalia, Sage replied. Why then do you think she became so agitated? Was this a test, or was he really interested in her input? Sage waited for her thoughts to gel before answering. The last thing she needed was more of Gray's ridicule. She's taking our investigation as a personal attack. The corner of Gray's mouth quirked up. Very good. That woman has too much pride, she added. That she does, but pride isn't fueling her attitude. Gray stopped next to an old purple VW bug. This is Thalia's. Sage tugged at the handle, and it's locked. We don't need to get in, just give it a quick look. Any signs of foul play? They looked in opposite windows. Definitely a girl's car. A pair of fuzzy dice and a set of Mardi Gras beads hung from the rearview mirror. The steering wheel was covered in a fuzzy purple material, matching the outer paint job, and a fox decal sat dead center on the back. Other than every cup holder in the car being filled with old coffee cups, nothing stood out as a clue. Sage met Gray's eyes and shrugged, having nothing to say. The car looked like a car, but saying that offered nothing to the conversation. I didn't have much hope either, but we had to at least look. Gray turned and began the slow march towards his bike. Now, on the other side of the parking lot, Gray turned and... I cannot read today. Gray turned and began the slow march towards his bike, which was now on the other side of the parking lot. You never told me why you think Sylvia got all uppity, Sage called after him. She was quick to make sure we weren't pointing the finger at her. Did you notice that? Why would we? She'd be stupid to draw attention to a missing persons case by calling us to investigate. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried that. So you think she is a suspect? Sage asked. Shadowrunners are the most feared of all the shades. We have our homework to do when we get back to the office. Gray moved faster now between the cars, once his bike came into view. That still doesn't give us much to work with. Even if she did it, where's the body? Sage wondered aloud. You're asking yourself the wrong questions. Gray turned and handed the manila folder to Sage. How does this case connect with the others? She opened the file and looked through the mess of papers that Gray had swiped. Most of the file was Thalia's employment information, her address, her resume, nothing that stuck out until she flipped to the back. A page labeled with temporary employment evaluation had Marin's name written on it, as well as the Gemini twins. The next page looked older, as if it had been around for a while. Staple marks and ripped corners made it look as if it had been roughly pulled from whatever file it originally belonged to. But Sage recognized the Animal Sanctuary's logo on top of the contract for hire agreement. The missing assistant is the connecting point. Sage half gasped as the realization struck her. Thalia had a hand in the placement of both Marin's people and the brownie at the Animal Sanctuary. And now she's gone missing too, Gray said. A blur caught in Sage's eye. At first it appeared like a small blip on the horizon, but it traveled with impossible speed, taking the shape of a cloaked figure as it came careening into Gray's back, before Sage could get a good look at it. Gray tumbled forward, and the file in his hands spilled out its contents as he came crashing into Sage. Unable to stop his descent, Sage pivoted out of the way, managing to stay on her feet while Gray met the pavement with a loud groan. Sage looked all around, searching for signs of the cloaked figure, hoping to avoid another surprise attack. What the hell was that? A sign. We're on the right track. Gray picked himself back up. Be on your guard. He didn't need to tell her twice. The shadow appeared again. Behind that car, Sage said. Gray balled his fist, ready to strike, and took a cautious step. Sage held her breath and watched him inch closer to the slowly bobbing shadow. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled, and in a frightening instant she realized Gray was after the wrong shadow. Something was behind her. Fight or flee? Her mind struggled to answer, and Sage instinctively spun on her heel. The cloaked figure came into focus, much smaller than she'd expected, childlike in size except for the brown cloak that draped to its feet. Where a face should be, she found only more brown cloth. Not a single bit of skin was showing. The moment that realization hit her, so did a tiny gloved fist. Pain struck like lightning, racing in all directions across her skull. Sage dropped to the ground and stuck her leg out, blindly hoping to take out an ankle or trip the cloaked figure before it had a chance to surprise her with another blow. Her ears rang, muting out the sounds, but somewhere in the back of her head, Devon's voice shouted like a ghost in her mind, "Don't be a victim." This wasn't training. No breaks, no mercy. Do or die. A brown booted foot came up towards her. She dodged, rolling away. As soon as her hands found pavement, Sage pushed herself up to her knees. Gray had disappeared, and she had no time to look for him. She turned to the cloaked figure again. Tiny as it was, she hoped she could overpower it with sheer force. She lunged with a fierce roar and rammed into her attacker's abdomen. They both came crashing to the ground, but Sage had the advantage. Landing on top, she unleashed a volley of punches towards the cloaked figure. But where her fist should have collided with flesh, she found only air. The cloak and whatever had given it shape evaporated into nothingness, as if it had never been there. The pain, however, still rang in Sage's ears so loudly that she couldn't hear her partner calling out for her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and she turned on him, fist cocked, ready, but relaxed as she met Gray's eyes. He mouthed something, but it was no good. She couldn't hear him. Gray's face hardened. He pointed to the ground. During the fight, he dropped a file of Thalia's information. There should have been scattered pages, but not even a shred remained. Sage sighed, defeated. That had been their best lead. Gray took her face in his hands, and the look in his eyes was something she had not seen before. Sadness? No. Concern? She'd seen that look once before when the vampire had nearly made a midnight snack of her. Did she really look that bad? The warmth of his hands felt nice and soothing. He rubbed the spot where the pain seemed to be emanating from, and like magic, it lessened. The ringing didn't completely stop, but the volume lowered from 10 to about 5. I think that little show of force just proves Sylvia belongs on our suspect list. He released her face and stood. That thing that attacked wasn't a shadow runner, but damned if it didn't act like one. And they now have the file. You think this was Sylvia's doing? But why? For every answer that she came up with, another question filled the void, and Sage pushed herself to stand, dusting off her ruined jeans. Why is a question I keep asking myself. Those dots have yet to line up. But while motive is important, we have something else equally valuable, a trail to follow. Which still leads us back to the question of bodies. Where the hell are they? Sage didn't care if he called her Captain Obvious or not. They were chasing their tails. No evidence, no motive, and only a very flimsy connection between the missing people. It was a start, she'd give him that, but hardly the break in the case either of them had been hoping for. Each missing person vanished without a trace. Gray puzzled it over loudly. No one poofs out of existence. There's always something left behind. I opened the Pandora's box with that question, didn't I? Sage said. Sage said it as a joke, a bad one, but the glimmer in Gray's eyes was more than amused. Newbie, you might just be onto something. He helped her to her feet. We've got homework to do. And that was chapter 17. So we will go into chapter 18 starting next week for any of those who are following along. So let's see if anybody's out there in the chat today. I know it's been quiet these last couple of weeks. We've got a Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca. Thank you for stopping by. And we have got a Regine. Hi there, Regine. Oop, that was my message. Nobody cares what I have to say. All right. I thought Sage was an anime person. Kitsunes are all over that. Yes, but there's a lot of conflicting information when it comes to kitsunes. There's a lot of different legends revolving around them. So the particular one that I'm going with is not familiar to Sage. So she's got some research to do, which that's a general theme when it comes to a lot of these stories, because I don't throw Sage in and have her be all powerful, all knowing. She really does have to learn the ropes as she goes through. Let's see. Very interesting. The points are starting to connect. And I think as they work through it, hopefully it will be interesting. This is another one, just like with the first book, where it's a whodunit. And you've almost met all the characters. So I won't ask the whodunit until all the characters have been introduced. But you've met almost all of them about now for this book. And have we met all the creatures? I think we've met all the new creatures. So in this book, we have kitsunes, which you will eventually have to meet the kitsune. I mean, obviously at the end, we have to solve the mystery. So we've got kitsunes, we've got the Gemini twins, we've got the brownie, we've got the shifters, we've got the shadow runner, we've got the terras, obviously the vampires, and the Djinn. So we've got a lot of characters in this book. And as each book in the series progresses, I try and introduce new creatures, because I want the series to kind of encompass all of the magical realm and introduce as many of them as I can. So it's one of the reasons I haven't finished book 5 is because I'm still trying to figure out how to incorporate the new creatures based on the ones I've already shown you and still keep it as fresh. And that's been it's been really problematic with book 5. I've gotten to the point where it's mostly written and I hate it. And if I hate it, you're not going to like it. So I'm not going to release it. I'm not going to release anything that I don't feel really good about. And that's been the problem with book 5. Is I don't like it. I have to go reevaluate the plot again and figure out where I went wrong and where I could go alternatively to make things work the way I need them to. We've got a cranky old man. Yes, Gray is a crotchety old man. Although he tried to make some snarky comebacks this time. So we'll see. We'll see if their relationship gets any better, or if that's their thing. They just snipe at each other all the time. And the fedora, yes. The stupid fedora. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you guys for watching. I love you guys. And I will see you again next week. I hope everyone's following along. And I hope that this week is wonderful for you. Remember, take time to take care of yourself. Do a little self-care. Little time for you is always good and helps you be able to take care of everything else in your world. So I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.